Senate concurrent resolution for 4007, a concurrent resolution promoting the application of an amendments convention to the Constitution of the United States to be called for the purpose of an amendment that provides an increase in the federal debt, requires approval from the majority of the legislators of the separate states.
Senator Olafson.
Mr. President, Senate Concurrent Resolution 4007 will invoke our rights as a state legislature under Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution to make application to Congress for the purpose of convening a convention to propose one amendment to the U.S. Constitution. And that proposed amendment can be found on lines 3 and 4 of the bill, and says it's 18 words. An increase in the federal debt requires approval from a majority of the legislatures of the separate states. It's a very simple proposal, very easy to understand. It would be a good visit in history to review the Article 5 process. Amendments to the U.S. Constitution can be proposed in one of two ways, either by an application of the states, which we are dealing with here, or by a two-thirds vote of both chambers of Congress. The proposed amendments can be ratified in one of two ways. It can be ratified either by the state legislatures or by conventions in the separate states. With applications from the state legislatures, it requires two-thirds of the states, or presently 34 states, to pass an identical resolution in order for Congress to act in their fiduciary duty to convene a convention. Any ratification of any amendment requires the approval of 3/4 of the states, or 38 states. I'd also draw your attention in the resolution to the limiting language on lines 18 through 22, where it says that the convention must be focused entirely upon and exclusively limited to the consideration of this one proposed amendment. And it's also interesting to note that there has never been a convention convened by applications from the states. And it's not that the states haven't submitted a lot of applications, because they have over the course of history. The reason there's never been a convention convened is because Congress, when they see momentum building, political will building within the states, when 15, 20, and 25 states support the same idea, Congress likes to take credit for it. So they jump in front of the parade and propose the very same amendment by a two-thirds vote of both chambers. That's been the history of the process to add amendments to the U.S. Constitution. So more than likely, with this effort, it would never happen that a convention would actually be convened. Once Congress sees the political will building, they would propose the same idea. And it's important to note, too, that if a convention is convened, it is one vote per state. It is not a proportioned or an apportioned vote. North Dakota would have the same power in a convention as would California, for example. It's also important to know that this is not an idea operating in a vacuum here in North Dakota. This is part of a well-organized national effort to take back some states' rights. And this resolution has commitments from prime sponsors in about 7 or 8 other states, with about that number of states seriously considering the idea. So now that I've explained the resolution, Mr. President, I'd like to explain some of my personal motivation for introducing this resolution. And if you don't hear anything else, make sure you pay close attention to this. This resolution, this national effort, is a nonpartisan effort. We all have to acknowledge the fact that the debt has increased under the control of both parties. And that is just a fact that no one can deny. Everyone who looks at the federal debt universally agrees that it is a serious problem. I haven't talked to anybody from anywhere on the political spectrum who denies that it is a problem. We all acknowledge that, but people have some old solutions on how to address the problem. Some people say, well, to address the problem, we just need to change the people in Congress. Well, we've done that, folks. We've changed the people in Congress over the last several decades, and what happened? The problem continued to grow. Other people say we just need to change parties. Well, we've done that more than once and more than twice, and the problem continued to grow. This is not a problem created by the people we put in Congress per se. It is not a problem created by parties. It is a systemic problem, and we must change the system. The system has become that Congress, individual members of Congress, have an incentive to get a hold of as much money as they possibly can and bring that back to their district. Then we reward that by re-electing them. We must change the system. This resolution presents a golden opportunity for good people from all parts of the political spectrum to send a clear message to your constituents, to the citizens of North Dakota, and most importantly of all, to members of Congress, that there is bipartisan understanding and bipartisan support for doing something about the federal debt, which is about to crush our country. I'd like to share with you some of the current numbers for the federal debt. We have gone over $14 trillion. It is over $45,000 per man, woman, and child, but not every man, woman, and child is a taxpayer. It is over $127,000 per taxpayer. And the debt to GDP ratio is now over 97%. And we will soon be funding 50% of our federal expenditures with borrowed funds. Some of you may have a concern that a convention will get out of hand and run away. I can understand that concern. I had that concern one time myself. But if you do some serious study and some rational thought, you realize that that fear is unfounded. First of all, there are some complex legal and constitutional reasons why that won't happen, but there are also important political reasons why that won't happen. And I'd like to briefly walk you through what would actually need to happen in order for something in the end to be adopted that was bad for our country. First of all, Article 5 provides no process for a full-blown constitutional convention. If you read the language of Article 5, it says it is a convention for proposing amendments. Nowhere in the Constitution is there a provision that allows the opportunity for a full-blown convention. The state legislatures would choose the delegates. The delegates would go to the convention knowing they have a mandate to consider one issue and one issue only. If the delegates don't follow that mandate and they thumb their nose at the will of their state legislature, they can be recalled and replaced. But if they did that, for the sake of argument, if they did that, if they opened it up to everything, there would immediately be filed a court action. A court action would have to say the convention is null and void because it's gone beyond the scope and call of the convention. But let's say the courts didn't act properly. The next thing that would have to happen is the delegates themselves would have to agree to something radical, extremist, or dangerous. Then the next thing that would have to happen is that Congress, in its fiduciary secretarial duty, if you will, would need to take the results of a convention and send it back to the states for ratification. Now, Congress should look at a runaway convention result and say, we can't send that back to the states because you've gone beyond the scope and call of the convention. But let's say Congress fails to do its duty, and it sends something radical, extremist, and dangerous to the states for ratification. Here comes your ultimate protection. 38 states need to ratify the results of that convention. And it's interesting to note that the opponents who fear this process don't worry about a runaway Congress. Congress can propose radical, extremist, or dangerous ideas, but the opponents don't talk about a runaway Congress. Well, folks, we have a runaway Congress. That's a reality. That's why we have $14 trillion in debt. I'd like to draw an analogy to the Devil's Lake flooding situation. We have been waiting for years for solutions to come from the federal government, and they aren't coming. Finally, we realized as a state that we have to take action ourselves to prevent a catastrophic, uncontrolled blowout of that lake. The federal debt is the same way. We've been waiting for solutions to come from Washington. They're not coming. We as states have to realize that we have to take action to prevent a catastrophic, uncontrolled blowout of our economy. I just hope we're not too late with both situations. The last two lines of our national anthem are, "We are the land of the free and the home of the brave." If we are to remain the land of the free, we must become the home of the brave and take action.
Further discussion on the Senate concurrent resolution. Senator Murphy.
To carry your answer to a question, Mr. President.
State your question.
For the passionate senator from District 10, my concern about this, that maybe you can answer for me, is right now we all know that we're facing a possible shutdown of the federal government because we don't have the money, and we know that it's happened before, and it's a tough deal to see. So if we're going to need, if this were adapted and done, if we're going to need reaction, and we need 3/4 of the states, or 2/3 of the states, is it 3/4, I believe? How can we do that in a timely manner? How do we avoid a shutdown for months or whatever it might take?
I'd be glad to answer that question.
Senator,
First of all,
Senator, do you wish to answer the question?
oh, I do. Very much so.
I mean, let's
First of all, I
pretend
need
it matters.
to point out that if you read the resolution, it requires a simple majority of state legislatures. It requires 3/4 of legislatures to ratify a proposed amendment. So you would need a simple majority of state legislatures in order to sign on and agree to an increase in the federal debt. A lot of state legislatures are in session at any given point in time, and if not, if this amendment is adopted, then Congress would have to do what the rest of us do. They would have to plan ahead, have a contingency plan, have a budget stabilization fund, for example, like the state of North Dakota has. And all state legislatures can be convened in a relatively short amount of time. If we have a true crisis situation, if we have a Pearl Harbor, a Hurricane Katrina, I am very confident that state legislatures would say to Congress, we're with you. We need to do something to protect our country and to help our citizens. And the other thing that you need to understand about federal borrowing and bonding does not happen overnight. It takes time to walk through that process. During that time, state legislatures can be convened to address the problem at hand.
Just reminding, while the president is never one to throw a cup of water on or a wet blanket on a good debate or discussion, just reminding that the Senate rules require that you address your comments to the president. That was my only intent there. So, proceeding on, Senator City.
Thank you, Mr. President. We all commend the passion and perseverance of the sponsor of this measure. I don't think I've ever seen someone work a bill or a resolution as hard as our illustrious senator has. And as far as the federal debt goes, any of you who have ever spoken to me about the issue know I always talk about it in terms of selling our children and ourselves into economic slavery. And what a shame it is that we've gotten ourselves in this horrible situation. But this resolution is a bad idea. The process calls for a convention, and the ratifying of it will take years that we don't have. There's no uniform way to select the delegates. Will we use a special election, or will they be appointed by legislative management? The caliber of people we have today, I'm sorry to say, is not the same as the caliber of people that we had at the original Constitutional Convention, after 7 years of war for independence, had refined their character and clarified their understanding of freedom in a way that we'll never know. If it's such a great idea, why hasn't it been done in 220 years? American greats from James Madison to Warren Burger have warned against calling for a constitutional convention of any sort or an amendments convention, saying that the convention would make its own rules and set its own agenda. In one motion, the convention could vote to suspend the rules and do just whatever it wanted. And once it is set in motion, Who's there to stop it or control it in any way? The Constitution and the Bill of Rights are the very bedrock of our freedom, and they could be fundamentally changed. The many questions and procedures that would arise as this whole process is playing out in an Article 5 convention would have to be settled by the Supreme Court. And then we've thrown more power into the hands of those 9 men and women. And I don't think that's what any of us want. I urge you to reject this call.
Further discussion on final passage of Senate Concurrent Resolution 4007. Senator Olafson.
Well, Mr. President, I'd like to respond to the comments from the last speaker. There are a lot of unknowns going into a convention, and everyone will admit that. But what is the alternative? To sit and do nothing and watch as our country is drained down the tube by debt? That's not an alternative. And as far as the timeline, we need to start now. We must act now. The fear of a runaway convention has been proven by scholarly research to be a myth. $14 trillion in debt is a reality looking right at us today. We have to take action. If not this, then what? If not now, then when? When do we start exercising our rights as a state to take this back under control? And as far as this never having been done before, it has been done many times, as I alluded to in my opening comments. States have made hundreds, if not thousands, of applications to Congress to convene an Article 5 Amendments Convention, but as I detailed, Congress steps in and takes the credit. That's the beauty of this. This does not have to get to 34 states to have its intended effect. If it gets to 26 or 28 states and then stops, and Congress starts acting responsibly, then we've achieved the intended effect without ever having a convention. And that is what will likely happen. We'll have 26 or 28 resolutions sitting there in application, and Congress will understand if they don't act responsibly, several more will be forthcoming. So it does not have to get that far to have its intended effect.
Further discussion. Senator Lafine.
Mr. President, I too am going to vote for this resolution. I personally think it's absurd that we can all sit back and watch this death of ours continue on and say that it's not us that's causing this. It's not Congress. It's not the President. It's our country. We have the ability to make a change. Our founding fathers gave us this ability. I trust them. They didn't put this clause into our Constitution for no reason at all. They looked down the road and said there may be a day when the states need to take back some rights. And I think this is a perfectly legitimate right for us to take back a little bit. I think it's time. I don't think we should all sit back and say that we should add this debt to our children, something that we can never pay in our lifetime. And I think it's time to do this. I actually believe that North Dakota is the perfect place for this to start.
Further discussion. Senator Triplett.
Mr. President, the carrier of the resolution just stood up a moment ago and asked us the rhetorical question of what is the alternative to this proposal. And I would submit that we have already responded a few moments ago when this body passed Senate Concurrent Resolution 4015, urging that our troops be brought home from foreign wars. I think that everyone who is writing on this topic of our increasing debt these days is consistent in saying that nothing will change unless we get the big four of defense, Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid under control. That all of the discretionary spending that Congress does is a drop in the bucket compared to those large items. As long as our country continues to choose to be the world's policeman, we will never get our debt under control. So I think that this resolution is the wrong way to go. The resolution we already passed is the right way to go, and we should leave it at that.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, we will proceed by voice vote. The question will be on the final passage of Senate concurrent resolution. Senator Olafson.
Mr. President, I rise to a point of order. I believe under Senate rules, a proposed amendment to the Constitution requires a recorded roll call vote.
The understanding of the President is that it would be required under two instances. One, if a senator asked for it. Two, if it was a proposed amendment to the North Dakota Constitution. I do not believe that asking for another body to amend the Constitution would itself require a recorded roll call vote.
Mr. President, I would then request a recorded roll call vote.
We will proceed by recorded roll call vote. Senator Nething, do you wish to be heard? Okay, we will proceed by recorded roll call vote at the request of Senator Olafson. Proceeding on the matter, the question will be on the final passage of Senate Concurrent Resolution 4007. The Secretary, please open the key. All senators have voted. Any senator wishing to change their vote? Secretary, please close the key and take the final tally. Final tally on Senate Concurrent Resolution 4007 reveals there are 31 senators voting yea, 16 senators voting nay. The concurrent resolution is adopted and the title is agreed to.